Our nation has the most generous immigration system in the world. But these are those, and there are those, that would exploit that generosity to undermine the values that we hold so dear. We need security. There are those who would seek to enter our country for the purpose of spreading violence or oppressing other people based upon their faith or their lifestyle. Not right. We will not allow a beachhead of intolerance to spread in our nation.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was President Trump at the National Prayer Breakfast on Thursday. President Trump's executive order temporarily barring immigration from certain Middle Eastern countries has been the source of protest and controversy since it was issued. Critics are calling it a Muslim ban, while supporters say it means to identify and target extremist ideology and protect national security. Here to separate fact from fiction and what the order was designed to accomplish is terrorism expert and Deputy Assistant to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be back.
Are you settling into the West Wing?
If pinching yourself 20 times a day to try and decide whether you're dreaming or not is settling in, I'd say yes.
You're getting there.
Getting there.
What was the intention of these executive orders? And there are two of them, one on immigration, one on refugees. What was the hope here in the West Wing?
Basically, to remedy the broken system that we have inherited from the Obama administration. The fact is, we have a system that doesn't allow us to make sure that the individuals who are coming into our nation, especially from these 7 countries of greatest concern, have a value system that comports with ours and don't have connections potentially to jihadist groups. So simply, Raymond, to make Americans safer.
Yeah, and to figure out where the holes are in the system.
Right.
I mean, it's a pause. It's not an extended ban on anybody.
It's a temporary moratorium.
Okay. Now, a judge that said 2 federal judges have temporarily blocked these executive orders. Is that an admission that there's a problem in the way they were drafted?
No, it's an admission that there are politically motivated judges out there. One of them I know is an Obama appointee. So the fact is the law, the 1950s law that deals with immigration standards is explicit. It is the commander-in-chief's prerogative to decide who can come into America and measured against what standards can they be recognized as refugees or as immigrants. That is there's nothing constitutional about it. It is the executive's mandate.
I want to play this for you. This is Senator Elizabeth Warren. I'm sure you haven't seen her running around the West Wing. This is her reaction to these executive orders. Watch.
President Donald Trump issued an executive order that strikes at the very heart of our democracy. The ban that imposes religious tests and keeps refugees and immigrants from entering our country is illegal.
Is this illegal?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It has no religious test in it.
I was about to ask you. She's insisting that this imposes a religious test. Does it?
Can we just jettison the whole religious aspect of this executive order? The most absurd accusation has been that this is about Islam or is xenophobic. If this were about one religion, and specifically about Islam, how is it that the most populous Muslim nation in the world, Indonesia, is not one of the 7.
Right.
How is it that the most populous Arab Muslim nation, Egypt, is left out? Surely if that were the hidden agenda, then those nations would be included.
Where did the Muslim ban thing come from?
Where did that
rhetoric?
Yeah,
yeah, we've been hearing that since last Friday.
Oh, well, that's from the campaign. I mean, from the get-go. As soon as Donald Trump said there is a problem, remember, after 2 attacks in Paris, after Berlin, after the mowing down of 80-plus people in Nice, every time Donald Trump reacted and said, we are not going to have this happen in America, therefore we will have a temporary halt. That's where the accusations began, right?
Why didn't the president include Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Afghanistan in those 7 countries? These are the actual pools of terrorist activity. The people who have attacked the homeland, that's where they originated from. Why not add those to the extreme vetting list?
So the great irony of this executive order is that we simply we used the foundation of this order, came from the Obama administration identifying these 7 nations as the ones of primary concern when it comes to immigration. So this was already identified by President Obama's White House. And the reason is because look at what these countries are. Our primary concern is ISIS and Al-Qaeda. ISIS established their so-called caliphate in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya. So that's why those were included, because that's the primary danger. Then Al-Qaeda, that not enough people talk about. Al-Qaeda is still out there, Somalia, Yemen, Sudan, and of course the last one should be a surprise to nobody, Iran. Iran's been the greatest state sponsor of terrorism since 1979. So these are just the logical ones to start with. There may be others. It's in the prerogative of the president, and they focus on the primary threat today, ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Do you think other states will be added as the days go on?
Some may be. That's up to the president. Some may be removed if we adequately reform the system, but that's up to him.
I have to mention this. The Vatican this week had an editorial on the cover, front page of L'Osservatore Romano, and it said, "Closure isn't progress." Archbishop Blaise Cupich in Chicago said this is a dark day in American history, referencing these executive orders. Your reaction as a Catholic and as advisor to the president?
I read those statements, and they conclude by focusing on human dignity, as the Church always should, made in the image of our Creator. And I ask about the human dignity of the dead, of the injured, from Brussels, from Berlin, from Nice, from Paris. We are taking these measures because of our desire to protect the population of the United States and every nation, whether it's Vatican City or not, with their wonderful Swiss guards, has the absolute mandate to protect their citizens.
And a wall.
And I didn't even want to mention it. Yeah. A giant
There is a big wall
big
around.
Wall.
I mean, just mentioning. Steny Hoyer, the Democratic whip, had this to say about these executive orders, and he raises a point that we hear a lot, and it seems on the surface to make sense. I want you to react.
Instead of making us safer, this ban will aid ISIS both materially and as a potent recruitment tool. For those non-immigrants or non-refugees teetering on the edge of radicalization, both here in America or in Europe, this ban could very well be the tipping point.
Will this be a radicalization tool, Sebastian Gorka?
I find this perhaps the most absurd argument. We are facing a group that decapitates you because you have the wrong passport, that will burn you alive because you are an infidel, you are a kafir. The idea that any piece of paper signed by any president, Democrat or Republican, is somehow going to influence their worldview of you as an infidel or me as an infidel is just patently absurd.
John McCain saying the same thing on Capitol Hill.
No comment. I mean, really. I mean, these individuals have a worldview that is not colored by executive orders. It's colored by a 7th century atavistic interpretation of Islam. It has nothing to do with us. I mean, think about it. I mean, the first war that we had with jihadis was the Barbary pirates 200 years ago. So this isn't something that's just suddenly accrued or has to do with our support of Israel or this presidential decree. This is a religious war from the perspective of the jihadists.
I want to shift to another executive order that got some attention, and it continues to be reported in some places, and it's about the National Security Council and the construction of it. In the executive order, Steve Bannon, the counselor to the president, is added as a permanent member of that National Security Council, and in the reportage, it says the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others have been relegated to a sort of ad hoc, come when your advice is needed role. Is this accurate, and what does it tell us about what the president intends?
As an individual who was honored to work for months for General Flynn in the ramp-up to the inauguration on the transition team for the National Security Council, and who now works for Steve Bannon in his Strategic Initiatives Group, I can tell you wholeheartedly again, I am just so amused by the things I read in the newspaper that bear no resemblance to what's happening inside the White House, are cut from whole cloth and are just completely fabricated. The fact is, what is Steve Bannon's title? He's the senior counselor, but his primary title is chief strategist. Now, the idea that the President of the United States, chief strategist, should not be on the National Security Council. Really? I mean, this is a man who's doing long-term strategic assessments and giving advice to the Commander-in-Chief. It's absolutely natural. The idea that anybody else has been relegated, no, the passage is clear. They will come when we are deliberating the issues that are relevant to them. If you're debating the next outbreak of bird flu, you don't necessarily need the chairman of the Joint Chiefs there.
George Bush claims he never invited Karl Rove into those meetings because that would politicize national security and foreign affairs. Fair?
I think Karl Rove was not Steve Bannon. He didn't have the same role that Steve Bannon had. Karl Rove was a political consultant, a political strategist, a person who was there to help package the presidency outward. Steve Bannon, in his blood, in his gene code, I've worked with him for 4 years, is a strategic thinker. He's not there to, spin. He's there to think about the long-term implications of X and Y.
Let's talk about Iran for a moment. We mentioned it in our headline segment, this ballistic missile trial this week. And then General Flynn came out and said this.
Recent Iranian actions involving a provocative ballistic missile launch and an attack against a Saudi naval vessel conducted by Iran-supported Houthi militants underscore what should have been clear to the international community all along about Iran's destabilizing behavior across the entire Middle East. As of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice.
The national security advisor there, what does that mean, putting Iran on notice, Sebastian?
Unlike our predecessors, we are not going to give away the game plan. We are sending a very clear message that there is a new administration and a new president. And we have completely jettisoned with the incredibly dangerous and naive policy of the Obama administration, whereby they believed a more powerful Iran would somehow balance the rising extreme Sunni influence of the region. This is so dangerous. The idea that we're going to release billions of dollars, we're going to sign a deal that really gives them threshold nuclear capability, and then they will behave themselves, which they didn't do. They continued their harassment. They launched this ballistic missile. No, that age is ended, and that's what General Flynn's speech was about.
Before I let you go, there was a lot of reportage about this Australian call. The president spoke with the PM of Australia. It seemed their conversation focused on 1,200 or so refugees that the United States had agreed to take in. The president asked why. And in the reportage, the conversation fell apart. Now there's great tension between Australia and the U.S. What is the state of this?
I would, again, say be careful with what you read in the newspapers. I wasn't in the room. It was Steve Bannon and General Flynn. A 20-minute call with the president is a pretty long call. That's a pretty good length call. But there is an issue here. A deal was made, an agreement was brought by the last administration. The president has decided to respect it, but there are still issues because, again, it's the question of who is coming. Have they been vetted? And more importantly, Raymond, can we vet them?
Right. Well, that's the big question. I'm going to talk to Nina Shea about that as well. I want your take on it. How do you vet some of these people who are coming here without papers? There's nothing but the clothes on their backs. Some of them have been in refugee camps for a year. Your thoughts?
This is an issue that's very close to my heart. My parents were refugees. They escaped communist Hungary in 1956 across a minefield. What happened to them? They arrived in the same fashion. No documents, nothing, not a penny to their name. What happened? They were in a processing camp for weeks and weeks and weeks, not waiting there, not filling out papers, but undergoing strenuous interviews. In fact, you could really call them counterintelligence interrogations. Why? Because if you don't have a database to check their story against, and the director of the FBI has said, we don't have the information.
Right.
The Syrians, even if they had it, wouldn't give it to us because we're bombing them, right? So there's no database. So what do? You ask them the same question 100 times, 200 times. You see if the story cracks. We don't do that. Raymond, some interviews for visas, this is not a joke, last 60 seconds. Okay? So we want to stop that. We want to make sure we don't have a Berlin attack here in Boston. So the fact is, we're going to change the system. We're going to review it. And if we need more stringent measures, those will be introduced.
Sebastian Gorka, thank you for being here.